B'chus His Majesty King Charles III, may he have a speedy recovery or a refuah shalema, dedicated by the British Mispalelim of Beis Eliezer Yitzchok in Crown Heights. The Chassid Reb Avrohom Ber from Bobroisk, known as Avrohom Ber Yirmiyaz, as a Bavusta Chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Maharash, the Rebbe Rashab. At the bar mitzvah of the Fiddiki Rebbe, Reb Avrohom Ber was one of the guests. And over there he shared his life story. And somebody wrote it down, and it is printed in Hatamim. And this is what it describes in Hatamim. The Chassid Reb Avrohom Ber was known amongst the Chassidim. Even though he was a kvad peh, he did not have a clear speech in worldly matters. However, when he spoke divrei chassidus or a story, he used to speak very clearly and well. His height and his hadras ponim would make a strong impression on people. His father, the Chassid Reb Yirmiyah, was born in Hamel, was a businessman and a lamdun muflag, was a big Talmid Chacham. And when he was a younger man, he once saw the holy face of the Alter Rebbe. However, it was mainly Mekusher to the Mittel Rebbe and to the Tzemach Tzedek. And he was from the Mekuravim of the Chassid Reb Isaac Hameler. So the Chassid Reb Yirmiyah raised his son, Reb Avrohom Ber, by the best Melamdim. And since he was a Baal Kishroinos and Chushim Nifloim, he was very successful in his learning. And the Lamdim of Hamel were very much Mekarav him. And once he became a Bacher, Reb Isaac Hameler took him as a Talmid. Reb Avrohom Ber learned by Reb Isaac Hameler for 4 years with tremendous shkida. And when he was 17, his father brought him for Shvuos, Tov Reish Gimel, to the yeshiva that was then in Lubavitch by the Tzemach Tzedek. My father, related Reb Avrohom Ber, had a lot of parnasa, and from year to year became wealthier and wealthier. He used to give a lot of tzedakah, and besides for that, my mother was a balas achnasa sorchem in a tremendous way. And once it came the time for my father to travel to Lubavitch, they will make a raffle in the town, who from the Chassidim will be zeicha to travel together with my father on his wagon, and my father will sponsor his trip. When I was 6 years old, which was in the year of Tavkuf Tzadik Beis, related to Reb Avrohom Ber, before they brought me to Cheder, so my father brought me to Lubavitch for Shvuos. After Pesach, I already found out that this year my father is going to take me for Shvuos to Lubavitch, and from Lag BaOmer and on, the preparations from the trip were on the way. On Lag BaOmer, they used to make a big seuda in one of the big shuls, and Reb Isaac Hameler used to say chassidus. And since there wasn't enough space for all the chassidim and the balabatim, so they used to celebrate for 3 or 4 days in a row, and sometimes even 5 or 6 days. There was an old minhag in Hamel that the Shabbos after Lag BaOmer, they will make it into a Yom Tov. And they used to call it a Freiliche Shabbos, just like the Shabbos Bereshis of after Simchas Torah. And if Lag BaOmer fell out on a Sunday, they will celebrate the whole entire week until after the Shabbos, the Freiliche Shabbos. The Seder of the celebration was that after davening, all the Lomdish Chassidim and the Gvirim and the Skenim will come to the house of Reb Isaac Hameler, and they will speak about all the matters that need to be fixed in the city, Beruchnius, and all the physical needs in the city that need to be fixed. And they will make a estimation of money, of how much money is needed for different needs. Then they will go and visit the cemetery. And from there, they will come to that shul where they set up the Seudas Mitzvah. That's on the day of Lag BaOmer. All the days of the celebration, Reb Isaac Hameler would say chassidus. And during those days, they used to collect all the estimated money that's needed for the needs of the community that they set out on Lag BaOmer. Those days were also used to make a achnasa l'cheder for the boys who came to the age of cheder. And they will also test the boys in Cheder and in Yeshiva to see their knowledge. When Lag BaOmer fell out on a Thursday or on a Friday, so Reb Isaac Hameler instituted that then the celebration should go on until the second Shabbos after that. And since that year Lag BaOmer fell out on Erev Shabbos Kodesh v'Chukoisai on a Friday, so the celebration went on for the whole entire week afterwards until after Shabbos v'Midbar. So I, said Reb Avrohom Ber, since I knew that these days my father is going to bring me into Cheder for the first time, and afterwards he's going to take me with him and with all the Chassidim to Lubavitch. I was in a very high mood. I was very excited. I will never forget that trip, and the impression of that trip was engraved in my heart. 4 wagons. Each wagon was attached to 2 horses. We left Hamel, and on each one of those wagons were 15 passengers. Some of them sitting in 2 lines inside a wagon. Some of them sitting on the sides of the wagon. 2 of them were sitting by the steps, and 2 were sitting next to the wagon driver. All of them excited and happy. The wagons were just as a resting place for an hour or 2. However, most of the people would actually walk by foot with a simcha and a pleasure that cannot be described. In the first wagon was sitting the Chassid of Isaac Hamiller, my father, and some more Chassidim, and I sat by my father across from Rabbi Isaac Hamiller. Sunday morning, early morning, my mother woke me up to rush and get dressed and go to the house of Rabbi Isaac Hamiller, because from there they would live. With a unique simcha, my mother put on me the new garment that she sewed for me, and she told me to wear it only on Shabbos, and when I will be Zoiche to go into the Tzemach Tzedek for Yechidus. When we came to that street where Rabbi Isaac Hamiller lived, that despite the fact that it was a very early morning hour, the street was already hustling and bustling for many people, just like on a market day. And once we came to the house of the Goy and Rabbi Isaac Hamiller, the courtyard was already filled with people, men, women, and children. Some were speaking excitingly, some were dancing, singing, and 4 wagons were standing there ready to go. To enter Rabbi Isaac Hamiller's house was impossible, because the house was packed with people. And my mother was not able to find my father. So while we were standing there, we found out from people that whole entire night, Rabbi Isaac Hamiller was speaking Chassidus, and as soon as it became light outside, they davened with the minyan. And just a little while ago, all the Lomdim and the Gvirim in the city came to go and escort to be Melave Rabbi Isaac Hamiller on his way to the Rebbe. Some little while passed, and all of a sudden we heard a sound of singing, and suddenly people started to come out of the main entranceway and out of the windows while singing and dancing, and they were actually, while they were coming out, they were facing the house. And the dancing, the singing was so loud that all the people in the courtyard right away stopped whatever they were doing and paid their attention to the entrance. After a few moments, the face of Rabbi Isaac Hamiller was seen by the door, leaving the house, and he stood and he benched the whole community who were there, saying goodbye, and he went on to the wagon. That's when my mother saw my father going up also to the wagon after Rabbi Isaac Hamiller. So she started to scream, Yirmiyah, Yirmiyah, here is Avrohom Ber, take him. Don't forget Avrohom Berke. But my father did not hear my mother. So when I saw that my tati forgot me, I started to cry loudly. And the wagon started to travel slowly. Everybody were standing around. As soon as the wagons started to travel, they started to sing Afreilach Anigan, and they walked behind the wagon to escort it. In the meantime, my mother saw Rabbi Yisrael Aaron the Melamed, and she told him that my father forgot me, and that she called him, but he didn't hear her. So Rabbi Yisrael Aaron the Melamed picked me up, and he made his way through the big crowd until he got to the wagon where my father was sitting, and he put me down over there. The wagon traveled slowly, and the crowd that was escorting the wagons was becoming bigger by the moment, because each street, more hundreds of people were joining. They kept traveling out of the city, and before all the hundreds of people from Hamel managed to turn back to go back to Hamel, the people who came from the city of Belitza, who came to greet us, the Chassidim were traveling to Lubavitch, already met us, meaning before all the hundreds of people from Hamel managed to turn back to Hamel, the group from the next city came to already greet us. In Belitza, Isaac Hamiller came down from the wagon with my father and all the travelers, and they left the wagon. This time I didn't leave the wagon because I was afraid that my father will forget me again, so therefore I just stayed sitting in the wagon, waited for them to come back. 5 days, from Sunday, Parshas Nosai, until Thursday, we traveled from Hamel to Lubavitch. We passed a few small shtetelach, big shtetelach, villages, and each place that we come was a simcha v'yom tov. On our trip, we met more wagons who were traveling to Lubavitch from Bobroisk, Smilyan, Tulchin, Minsk, Borisov, Shlovin, Shklov, Rogachov, and more cities. And also a bunch of groups who were traveling by foot. On Wednesday, when it was mincha time, we were supposed to arrive at the city of Dubrovna. The last stop, which was in the village of Zalishkina, which over there lived the chassid Reb Eliezer the Mutzlach, 15 or 16 kilometers away from Dubrovna. So when we came to Zalishkina, we found over there many wagons, about 20 or 30 wagons, parked, and a few hundred people lying down on the grass on a big field right outside the shtetl, right across the street from the courtyard, from the chotzer of the chassid Reb Eliezer the Mutzlach. Here and there, you were able to see tens and tens of groups of people together, some speaking, some sleeping, some eating and drinking, some chazering chassidus, some are dancing a chassidish tantel. And I kept holding on to my father's garment so he should not forget me behind. The chassid, Reb Eliezer the Mutzlach, his sons and his son-in-laws, his wife, his daughters and his daughters-in-law, his grandchildren, his brothers and his sisters, and all of their families, they were all busy serving this huge crowd of chassidim that were traveling to Lubavitch and to give them food and drink and everything for free. Reb Eliezer used to say, everything that the Rebbe accomplished in Shamayim for me, 99% belongs to the chassidim, and just 1% from me. So eat, my friends, eat and drink, because it is the bracha of the Rebbe and a present of the Eibishter that you are eating. Eat and drink, and be merry, be happy. Eat and drink, so you should be chassidim, ba'alei koyach u'gvura, to serve the Eibishter with Torah, mitzvahs, and avodah shebelev. In the village of Zalishkina, we met the famous chassidim Harav Tzadik Reb Hillel Paritcher and Reb Tzalel Ozeritcher. The big simcha of when Reb Isaac Homeler met these two chassidim, Reb Hillel Paritcher and Reb Tzalel Ozeritcher, you cannot describe. And all three of them ate together the seudah in the house of the chassid Reb Eliezer the Mutzlach. When we left Zalishkina, we left together with about 40 wagons and camps of people walking by foot. Most of them carrying their brief cases on their shoulders with a cane in their hand. Amongst them people who were singing Gishmak and Nigunim, while people on the side answering him back with great simcha. Our way led us through a big forest between tall trees, and the voice, the sound of the singing was heard very far. And each one of the tnuas of the song, of the niggun, was heard as if there is a group of people singing far away in the forest that are answering back to what we're singing over here because of the echo. From far, I saw the end of the forest because over there the sun was shining, which was not so in the forest because the branches of the trees covered up on the sun, and it seemed as if it was already shkia inside the forest. But only in the end of the forest you're able to see some light. And soon afterwards, we came out of the forest onto a wide, big field, and the sun was shining strongly, and in front of our eyes was seen a tall mountain. All the people in the wagon, besides for Rabbi Isaac Ameler and the old chassid, Rabbi Yechiel Ber Reb Meir Baal Bechi, and the Goyin, the old Goyin, Reb Zalman Doiv, the Milchiker. So besides for those three, everybody else came off the wagon to walk by foot until we came to the top of the mountain. When we came to the top of the mountain, from far we were able to see the roofs of the homes of the city of Dubrovna. However, it was still more than 2 kilometers away. And we saw on the bottom of the mountain a big crowd standing on the two sides of the way. And after a short while, we found out that this is the chassidim of the city of Dubrovna, accompanied by the famous Goyin, the chassid, Reb Nechemia Dubrovner, who came out to greet us. The chassidim were traveling to Lubavitch. When we came down from the mountain, and we came to the place where the chassidim of Dubrovna were standing, that's when Rabbi Isaac Homeler came down from the wagon to see the Harav Tzadik, Harav Goyin, Reb Nechemia Dubrovner. My father also went with him, and he put me next to Reb Avrohom Ber, the wagon driver, that he should keep an eye on me. And he told me to follow all instructions that he tells me to do. Since I was very tired from the way, I was actually sleeping, and therefore I didn't even know that we arrived in the city of Dubrovna. When I woke up, Rabbi Avrohom Ber, the wagon driver, was already after breakfast, and he told me that in about an hour or two, we're going to be on our way again. And towards the evening, we will come to Lubavitch. And on Thursday evening, we came to Lubavitch. Erev Shabbos Kodesh, an hour before Shkia, the shul, the big shul, was already packed with people. And on the bima, that was in the middle of the shul, were standing the sons of the Rebbe and some of the older Chassidim, amongst them Rabbi Yitzchok Ber. And then somebody made an announcement that the Rebbe is coming. It became very quiet, and all the eyes were looking at the place of where the Rebbe will be coming from. And a moment later, I was standing on one of the ovens, being held by Rabbi Avrohom Ber, the Balagola, and I saw a man wearing white clothing and a fur hat on his head, walking towards the bima, and he sat down on a chair that was prepared for him, and with a mighty voice, he started, Vaydaber Noses Reish B'nei Gershon Gam Heim, which is a mimer which was then later on printed in the Likutei Torah on Parshas Nosei. I remember how I entered with my father then to the Rebbe for Yechidus. Many hours my father was standing in the room outside of the Tzemach Tzedek's room to wait, and he put me sitting on the window. And once it was time for my father to enter, my father asked somebody to get me from the window, and he passed me from hand to hand over the heads of all the Chassidim to my father. My father entered the Rebbe's room, and I was holding onto his garment, schlepping behind him. The room where the Rebbe was sitting was a big room. By the walls were closets filled with Sfarim. The Rebbe was sitting by a big table, and on top of it were a few Sfarim, notes, and pushkas of coins, and 2 lit candles. When my father entered the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe was looking at a sefer that was open before him. And when my father came close to where the Rebbe was sitting, the Rebbe picked up his eyes from the sefer, and he looked at my father's face, and he looked at my face. My father was shaking in his whole body. I also became overwhelmed, and I started to cry quietly. And the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe, stretched out his hand to take the note that was in my father's hand, because my father was so overwhelmed that he just stayed standing in his place, not knowing what to do. So my father stood still, his head bent downwards, and tears were coming down from his eyes onto the floor. In the first moments, he held himself in to cry quietly. However, after a little while, he burst out in a loud crying voice. And when I saw that my father was crying, my heart shrunk, and I cried quietly, and I looked in the holy face of the Rebbe. For a while, the Rebbe wrote the note that my father gave him, and while he was reading it, for about 2 or 3 times, he looked at my father's face and at my face, and then the Rebbe spoke to my father. When the Rebbe started to speak to my father stopped crying, and his lips were moving to repeat quietly all the words that the Rebbe was telling him. For a long time, the Rebbe spoke to my father. Afterwards, my father asked the Rebbe a few questions, and the Rebbe answered. And when the Rebbe finished, my father said, "This is my son. Be'ezras Hashem, I'm bringing him into Cheder, and I'm asking the Rebbe to bench him." And he brought me close to the Rebbe. For a moment, the Rebbe was misbeinen, he was thinking, and he closed his holy eyes. After a few moments, he opened up his holy eyes and he looked at me and he said, "You should be a shakdan," meaning you should be devoted to your learning. Do not be hoylech batel, meaning don't go around wasting your time. And Hashem should help you to be a lamdon and a chassid. Then my father answered aloud, Amen, and I answered Amen after him. When we left the Rebbe's holy room and we came to the small shul, my father picked me up. He burst out in a Chassidish dance with the Chassidim, because that was the minhag those days, that anybody who was zeiche to be by the Rebbe in Yechidus, when he came out, he went into a tencel. For a long time, my father danced until all of his clothing were soaking wet from sweat, as if they took them out of a bowl of water. So he sat by one of the benches on the side to rest a little bit. And he told me, "Sit down and rest a little bit, and then later we will go to the inn of where our Rav is, Rabbi Yitzchok Ber." I saw that my father's mood is very, very excited, even though he was physically very worn out. And I was able to see that from the fact that even though he was sitting to rest, but his feet and her hands were still clapping and banging to the tune of the people dancing and singing. Since I remember myself, I liked Simcha in general, and Chassidische dance specifically. And from the day that I remember myself, I remember the Chassidische dancing. I remember that already when I was at the age that I was only able to crawl, I wasn't even able to stand up yet, whenever they will hold on to me, and whenever they will put me by that wagon that's meant to teach little babies how to walk, so as soon as I was in a standing position, I will make those same motions of dancing that I saw in my father's house. And when I started to be able to walk and to express a few words, I would scream that I want to dance, a Chassidische dance. My mother very much liked to be machnis orchim in general, and especially Chassidische Farbrengens. So very often, my father's friends, the Chassidim, would come to us and they would learn and speak Divrei Chassidus, and afterwards they would go into a dance, a Chassidische dance, and I would dance with them. I would hold on to the garment of one of the Chassidim. Amongst the Farbrengers and the dancers were two Jungelite, which were the youngest of the whole group. And they were very freilich Chassidim, and they knew how to sing, Gishmak. And also their dancing was very unique. And whenever they would start a Chassidische dance, they will pick me up on their shoulders. Sometimes it will be Anshel Gittis who will pick me up, and sometimes it will be Shleima Peshes. And I was in seventh heaven. The small Simchas Torahs, the kleine Simchas Torah, that's how I used to call those Farbrengens. And from when I was 4 years old, when I started to go to the cheder of Rebbe Elimelech, to play with kids my age and to hear stories of Chumash, Nach, and Agadah, I used to tell my friends that yesterday or 2 days ago, we had in our house a kleine Simchas Torah, a small Simchas Torah. And all the friends in my class, and sometimes even the kids in the older classes, were very jealous of me. And I felt very high about myself because I was the only kid in the cheder who had little Simchas Torah in his house. And besides for that, I'm the only kid who had a chance to very often ride on the shoulders of the Freilich Chassidim, Rebbe Anshel Gittis, and Rebbe Shlomo Peshes, which is something that no other kid in class or in the whole cheder had a chance to. This is something that I used to use to tease the kids in my age in general, and especially my classmate, Avrohom Ber, the son of the Chassid Rebbe Aryeh, specifically. Whenever we met, he used to tease me, because I was named after my Zayde, the father of my mother, who passed away young. And he, Avrohom Ber, was named after the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe. And since he didn't like me, and he would tease me about my name, so I used to tease him back about the fact that I'm the only one who has a chance to ride on the shoulders of Rebbe Anshel Gittis or Rebbe Shlomo Peshes. One time I asked my mommy, why the Chassidim who were Farbrengt and spoke for a few hours, why are they so happy and they go into a dance? So my mother answered me, because the Chassidim, they sat and learned, and they are happy with the Torah that they know. And that's the Simcha of the Torah. And that's when I started calling all those Farbrengens the Kleine Simchas Torah. And since I was very used to this Kleine Simchas Torah, therefore, it wasn't a wonder for me, this big dancing of the Chassidim here in a small shul outside of the Tzemach Tzedek's room. But what I did not understand was, why is it Davke after they came out of Yechidus? And why is this entering to the room of the Rebbe, why is it called Yechidus? Because I heard the Chassidim asking each other, were you yet in Yechidus? And they would answer each other, yes, I'm going to Yechidus, I was in Yechidus, tomorrow I'm going to go into Yechidus. Or they were telling each other, you heard this Chassid was in Yechidus, he's going into Yechidus. So these two questions, why going into the Rebbe's room, why is it called Yechidus? And the second question, why when they came out of the Rebbe's room, they dance? That is something that bothered my mind and didn't let me rest. And when I saw that my father is in a very good mood, so I asked him these two questions. So my father asked me, do you know about the Mishkan that Moshe made by Hashem's command? Do you learn that there was a special place in the Mishkan, that in that place was standing the Oren and the Luchos? And once a year on Yom Kippur, Aaron HaKohen would go there to bring Ketores and to daven on behalf of all the Yidden. So I wanted to show off to my father my knowledge. So I right away told my father everything I knew about the Mishkan and about the house that Shlomo HaMelech built, about the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Aron, the Luchos, the Avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in general, and him going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim in specific, and that when the Kohen Gadol mentioned Hashem's holy name, all the people in the Azara will bow down. I kept speaking and speaking, and I actually showed my father with my body how they will bow down in the Beis HaMikdash, because it's been already 2 years that on Yom Kippur I was in shul, and when everybody did the Kriya and Ishtachava by Musaf Yom Kippur, I did it just like the adults. And when I got up from my place, I ran to tell my mother, and my mother gave me a slice of white bread without butter, telling me because it's Yom Kippur. So I was describing and imitating all of that to my father in Lubavitch. So my father asked me, who enters with the Kohen Gadol to the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur? So I answered, only the Kohen Gadol. Nobody enters with him. So then my father asked me, what would the Kohen Gadol do when he finished the holy Avodah of Yom Kippur in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So I answered that my Rabbi Elimelech told us that the Kohen Gadol was very wealthy, and he had golden clothing, and he used to make them out of the gold that he has in his house. And when he finished his Avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, he will go home, and all the Yidden will escort him, singing and dancing, and they will come to his home by the Chatzar. There were set up tables with foods and drinks, and everybody would rejoice with him because Hashem forgave the Averos of the Yidden. So now my father asked me, do we have a Beis HaMikdash and a Kodesh HaKadoshim? So I answered with a sigh that came out of my heart, no, we don't have a Beis HaMikdash and not a Kodesh HaKadoshim. And then I looked up to my father to see what will be his reaction. What is he going to tell me? But before my father managed to answer me, a group of people burst into the shul with a Freilachenigin and joined the dancing. And when my father saw that most of the people in the group are from the Chassidim of Hamil, from our town, he jumped up from his place with stretched out hands and with dancing feet, and he joined the dancing. I was a little taken aback that I didn't know what to do. In the beginning, I wanted to run also to my father, but I was afraid that from all the adults who are dancing so fast, I'll be trembled over. So I stayed back, and I stood up on the bench. In the meantime, I saw Rabbi Avrohom Ber, the Balagala, that he's also amongst the dancers. So when he passed next to me, I called his name, but he didn't answer me. I was standing on a bench, looking, and I saw over there in the middle of the dancing, in the middle of the circle, that my father was dancing, and around him, a few of the Chassidim of Hamil, amongst them Rabbi Avrohom Ber, the Balagala, and Reb Shlomo Peshes, and all of them, their eyes were closed. Each one had his right hand on the shoulder of his friend, and with his left hand, he was moving based on the beat of the niggin. The Helike Hergesh that was shining on the faces of the dancers, I cannot describe. The Ahava, the Achva, and the rejoicing is something that I cannot describe. All of them were holding on to each other with peace and friendship, and I was melting with my desire to join their dancing. 2-3 times Rabbi Avrohom Ber, the Balagala, passed next to me, and I called him, but he did not hear me. Then all of a sudden I felt that somebody grabbed me from my back, and I flew in the air, and after a moment I landed onto the shoulders of a chassid, and I was deep inside the circle of the dancing. So I looked down and I saw there was Reb Shlomo Peshes who picked me up, and I was extremely excited. And then sometime in the middle of the dancing, a big announcement came out. Ad kan Kofa Aleph. This was the voice of the chassid Reb Zalman Yaakov Esther Dishes, which was one of the Gvirim of Hamel. And he was a gabbai in the shul in Lubavitch. And they stopped the dancing because it was time to daven mincha, and they prepared for mincha. All the things that my father told me about the Beis HaMikdash, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Aron, and his last question of, do we have a Beis HaMikdash and a Kodesh HaKadoshim now, left by me a little bit of a feeling of sadness and bitterness. And my mind started to race with a new question. Why are they happy? The Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, and we don't have a Kodesh HaKadoshim today. The Chassidim started to daven mincha in a rejoicing, singing way. They were davening in a Simchas Torah style. And my mind was racing with this new question. Why are they so happy? Isn't the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? And that's when I remembered all the stories that I heard from my Rabbi Elimelech, that he told us on Tisha B'Av last year. So I decided that when my father will finish davening mincha, I will ask him about it. When he finished davening, Reb Zalman Yaakov Esther Dishes announced that he's going to bring mashke for Beisim. And I turned to my father and I told him, you asked me if we have now also a Beis HaMikdash and a Kodesh HaKodashim. But we don't have, not a Beis HaMikdash and not a Kodesh HaKodashim. So why are you singing and dancing? Why are you so happy? Isn't the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? So when my father heard my shaila, he answered me, you're right, my son. The Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, Mir HaKodesh, is destroyed. And when the Yidden will do tshuva, the Eibishter will send us Mashiach, and he will gather us from the Arba Kanfis HaOretz, and he will bring us with our homes and our kelim to Eretz Yisrael, and he will rebuild Yerushalayim and Beis HaMikdash. However, now we do not have not a Beis HaMikdash, and not a Kodesh HaKodashim. However, says my tati, since the day the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, till Mashiach will come, Lubavitch is our Yerushalayim. And the shul where the Rebbe davens, that is our Beis HaMikdash. And the room where the Rebbe sits, that is our Kodesh HaKodashim. And the Rebbe, he is the Orain, which in him is the Luchos, the Teres Hashem. This is our Orain. The look, the seriousness on my father's face, when he was telling me all of that, made on me a tremendous impression. And I was thinking, here, not so long ago, me and my father were inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, and now when we're in the shul, we're in the Beis HaMikdash. How moiridik is that? While I'm thinking all of these thoughts about the Beis HaMikdash and the Kodesh HaKodashim, and I heard my father continuing to talk to me. Do you know, my son, that when Moshe Rabbeinu brought the Orain with the Luchos inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, he heard the voice of Hashem speaking to him from between the Keruvim which were on top of the Orain? Yes, I answered to my father. I actually heard once mommy reading that from a sefer to my aunt, and I overheard her describing all of that. So these words that Hashem spoke from the Keruvim, said my father, those are the words that the Rebbe tells each person from the Chassidim who enters his room for Yechidus. The words of the Rebbe, those are the words of Hashem. And just like the Kohen Gadol would enter the Kodesh HaKodashim by himself, so too anyone who enters the room of the Rebbe, which is the Kodesh HaKodashim, he goes in by himself, and that's why we call it Yechidus. And just like when the Kohen Gadol came out of the Kodesh HaKodashim after Yom Kippur, him and all the Yidden would rejoice. So too us, the Chassidim, when we come out of our Kodesh HaKodashim, the Rebbe's room, we're rejoicing on all the great chesed that the Eibishter did with us. And it was mezakeh us to be in Kodesh HaKodashim and to hear the Rebbe's bracha. You should remember well, said my father, the words of the bracha that the Rebbe benched you. And in Mitzvah Hashem, when we will come home, you should tell everything to your mother in detail. At that time, I didn't yet have a chance to show my father that I remember word for word everything that the Rebbe told me in Yechidus, the whole bracha. But before I had a chance to do so, Reb Zalman Yaakov Esther Dishes came over, and he forced my father to come to the table and to say some l'chaim and to farbais. My father gave me a piece of cake, and I made a bracha, a better minim mezainis out loud, and the father and the people who were sitting around heard my bracha and entered Amen. And Rabbi David Chazen and the Baruch Shimon, their Einbinder, praised my father for taking me to Lubavitch. You are a wise guy, said Rabbi David Chazen to my father, that you took your Avrohom Ber to Lubavitch. Now in this generation, we need to be margil. We need to educate the sons of Chassidus from when they could start walking, from a very young age. In my opinion, said Baruch Shimon, this is actually his mother's wisdom, not his father's wisdom, meaning my mommy. She is a machnesses oirchim and a Chassidische woman. Then I said to them, I was with my tati in Kodesh HaKodashim, and the Rebbe gave me a bracha. And then I looked at my father's face to see if he's allowing me to repeat to them the bracha that the Rebbe gave me. However, my father was in the middle of talking to somebody across the table. In the meantime, Reb Shlomo Peshes came running, all sweaty, and he said that all the Chassidim from Hamel were already all in Yechidus, and they are now davening mincha, and in a short while they will come here. For such good news, said Reb Zalman Yaakov Esther Dishes to Reb Shlomo Peshes, for such good news, you deserve a cup of mashke and a shtickle mezainis. Here, take and make a bracha and eat. Reb Shlomo Peshes made a mezainis, and then a shehakal on the mashke, and he benched all the people around with a lechaim, with a shining, feirliche face, And when he finished drinking his l'chaim, he started to clap with his hands and dance in his place. And then he turned to all the people sitting around, wondering, you're sitting here in one place, eating and drinking without dancing? I know that the chassid, Reb Zalman Yaakov Estadishes, is a great chassid. And Rabbi Isaac Homeler said that he has seichel hayashar, but his kaltkeit and his manners is something that I cannot tolerate. If you guys are going to listen to him and follow his instructions, you will become like stuffed white geese. Brider, my brothers, we should leave all of this kaltkeit and manners behind in Hamel. And here when we come to Lubavitch, which is our Yerushalayim, we should leave all of these manners and all of these feelings and being worried about how people are going to look at us. That's what Reb Shlomo Pesha said. Then Reb Aber David, the Chazan, said, hey, look who is talking. When we were young alike, in other words, to understand what's happening here, Reb Shlomo Pesha was a younger man. Reb Aber David was an older chassid. So he said about Reb Shlomo Pesha, after he said this whole thing about leaving your manners behind and joining the dancing, he said, look who is talking. When we were young alike, we did not dare open up our mouths in Achsidische Verbringen. So much more so that we did not dare express our opinion out loud like this. Believe me, Shlomo, this is a chutzpah. Times have changed, said Reb Gershon Leib the Sefer to Reb Abba David the Chazan. In our days, things were completely different. The Yungalite knew that they are Yungalite, they knew their place, and they knew that they just need to listen to what the Chassidim are speaking between each other. And the Farbrengen went on and on. Then we traveled back home, and when I came home, I told my mother everything that happened to us, everything that I saw on the way, everything I saw in Lubavitch, and I repeated to my mother the bracha that the Rebbe gave me. When I came back from Lubavitch, a big shkida, a big devotion to learning awoke within me. And the Melamed was very happy with me. And in the next Zman of learning, my father already moved me up to the next Melamed. For the next 4 years, rang in my ears the words of the Rebbe, that you should be devoted to learning and do not walk around wasting time. And his Helike bracha, that Hashem should help you to be a lamdin and a chassid. And my father and my mother had a lot of pleasure from my devotion to learning and my anhaga b'yiras shemayim. And when I was 10 years old, and I already had quite a knowledge in learning, my father took me with him again on a trip to Lubavitch. And again I went into the Yechidus by the Rebbe. And when the Rebbe finished speaking to my father, he looked at me strongly, and he turned to my father and he said, his face showed that he was devoted to learning. And the Rebbe asked me, what did you learn? So I answered, I learned Beitza, Baba Kama, Baba Metzia, and I'm right now in the middle of the Perek Mokem Shenahagu in Psachim. And in Tanakh, I learned Chumash with Rashi and Nevim Rishonim. So the Rebbe thought a little bit. Then he said, what you learned is good, and in the future you should finish Psachim, and then you should learn Baba Basra and Adarim, Shulchan Aruch Eirachaim, Chumash Keseder Aparshiyas with Rashi, Eirachaim, and Panim Yafais. You should learn Tehillim with Rashi, and then you should learn Nevi'im Achreinim, and the Eibishter should help you, that you should be devoted to learning Torah, and you should be a Yerushalayim, and you should be a Lamdon, Chassid, ve'Yerushalayim. In the following 3 years, from the age of 10 until Bar Mitzvah, I finished Psachim, Baba Basra, and Adarim, and I chazered Baba Kama and Baba Metzia, and I knew them very well with all the Tosfos. And when my father brought me to Lubavitch for my Bar Mitzvah, I was zeiche that the Rebbe placed his holy hands on my head, and he benched me. However, the nusach of the bracha I did not hear. And when we came back from Lubavitch, Arav Agoy and Arav Chassid, Rabbi Isaac Homeler accepted me to his yeshiva to be a Talmid in the third table, which means the third level. After a year, I moved up to the second table for a year, and then I moved up to the first table. And when I was 17 years old, I was accepted in the yeshiva of the Rebbe in Lubavitch in the second shir, which the Mekachir, and that shir was the son of the Rebbe Harav HaKodesh Rabbi Yisrael Noach. And the tester was the Rebbe's son-in-law, Harav HaKodesh Rabbi Levi Yitzchok. Atkan from Hatamim.